Hey everybody, we're looking at New Answers lesson number 21, and it says, what question is, how did defense attack structures come about? Well, if you're like me, first question is, what is a defense attack structure? Like that the wording, how those words went together, I was confused. I was like, what are we even talking about here? However, as you continue to read the material, so hopefully you're reading, it becomes very clear what they're talking about, okay? It's basically the claws, the teeth, the etc. of animals and plants, but mostly animals that are used to defend or attack, okay? And so thus the defense attack structures. Some examples they give in your book for plants is the Venus flytrap, smashes down and catches the flies. The arachnids is the spider who spins their webs, and some have venom and poison venom and things. Insects, they have the bombardier beetle, and this one was very interesting. The bombardier beetle says that it has a system which involves shooting a hot, noxious mixture of chemicals out of a special swivel nozzle in its backside into the face of predators such as rodents, birds, frogs, or other insects. That's definitely a nice defense or attack structure. Other animals, we have cats and reptiles, and you can go down dogs, etc. And so just think about what you may see in wherever you live, or have seen at the zoo, different things, and the different defense or attack mechanisms that these different creatures have. Okay. So, we've named them. We know what they are now. And the question is, who cares? Right? Who cares? But apparently, this is something that people are concerned about. And so something that we need to be at least aware of so that if we get asked a question, we can defend it. Okay? So, historically, people looked at nature and saw God's design as good. Okay? We can go back to a guy named William Paley in 1802, who wrote the book called The Natural Theology, or Evidences of Existence and Attributes of the Deity Collected from the Appearances of Nature. That's a lot. Okay, so what did he have to say? In essence, it says, in this work, Paley makes the argument for the design in nature being attributed to a designer, or God, and included features that were red tooth and claw as part of his original design. Okay, these defense structures. As basically at some point people were saying all of this was designed by God. They're all good things. They're designed. However, then you start having many people questioning the goodness of God when they see these, quote, nature red in tooth and claw. These things that Paley was talking about, okay? Specifically, we have Darwin, who's stirring the pot, so to speak. And originally, he believed the animals were well designed for what they do and agreed with Paley's arguments. But later, Darwin started to see some difficulties with Paley's arguments concerning design, especially in regards to evolution. And he came up finally with this question: how could a good God be the author of death and bloodshed? And eventually he turned away from God. In more modern times, we have a man named David Attenborough, and he is a presenter of many popular nature documentaries produced by the BBC, or the British Broadcasting Corporation. So he's producing a lot of nature videos and nature documentaries, and he argues strongly for the belief in evolution because of the suffering that the natural world exhibits, okay? In your book on page 260, it gives a long quote from him, and I'm going to read it for you. It says, when creationists talk about God creating every individual species as a separate act, they always instance hummingbirds or orchids, sunflowers, and beautiful things. But I tend to think instead of a parasitic worm that is boring through the eye of a boy sitting on the bank of a river in West Africa, a worm that's going to make him blind. And I asked them, are you telling me that the God you believe in, who you also say is an all-merciful God who cares for each one of us individually, are you saying that God created this worm that can live in no other way than an innocent child's eyeball? Because that doesn't seem to me to coincide with a God who's full of mercy. And so they have basically turned all these animals that are able to kill, able to destroy, able to defend themselves, able to cause damage by their beaks, their claws, their teeth, whatever the case is, and saying there can't be a God because a merciful God would have never created these things. If you look on page 262, 263 of your books, it's the question is, why biblically is the world like this, okay? And the biblical response to DAS is that the theology of Darwin and Attenborough has made a major assumption. And that assumption is this, that the world is now what it always has been. The Bible, as early as Genesis 3, makes it clear that that's not the case. The original creation was perfect, but we can see by looking at the world around us that there has been drastic change. The change was a result of the fall of man, an event which fundamentally altered the world, okay? So we know that at the fall, things changed, according to the Bible. Two major perspectives to understand these defense attack structures biblically we want to look at, okay? The first being this. The present features used in defense attack systems were not originally used for that purpose, okay? So basically we're saying God created, dogs with big, large teeth, or, birds of prey with sharp claws and talons and things, but that was not their original purpose. The design was the same, but the function was different. The teeth and claws might have been used to dig for food or to help, claw up an area where they could lay down and rest or sleep or whatever. Some type of reason for these being there that wasn't the original design for attack or defense, okay? And that theory is pretty good, but the problem we have with this theory is thorns. Thorns, as we can see as you read the material, is clearly something that was a change to plants, and that's biblical. It's in the Bible. The God adds it, okay? So the second perspective or theory is this. Defense attack structures, design features were brought in by God as a result of the fall of man, okay? Because of the fall and the curse that was placed on the earth and the animals and man, that God brought in these new designs, okay? On page 268 of your book, it says this. To clarify, this was the result of man's sin, not God's original design, and the consequences of sin still remain. So, as we continue to look at these things, we say, scripturally, there's a possibility for these, okay? The thorns, though, show plants physically changed. We also know that the serpent was forced to crawl, and that's a physical change. So the theory or the probability that God brought in something new after the fall is biblical, okay? Concluding, we want to look at this, okay? Both perspectives or theories that explain the changes that occurred when man sinned. Both of them have merits. However, the Bible doesn't say clearly one way or the other what happens. And you can look at and see possibly there could be aspects of both that are included, both of these theories in today's world, okay? So just lastly, I want to read a couple things to you, okay? It says, regardless of the accusation that a loving and perfect God made the world as we see it today, ignores the Bible's teachings about the results of the curse. A proper understanding of why there are defense attack structures in the world today should be a reminder that the world is sin-cursed and that we are all sinners in need of a Savior. After the fall, God acted justly. He did what was right, but during the curses in Genesis 3, God did something that only a loving God would do. He gave the first prophecy of redemption. He promised a Savior. Genesis 3:15 says, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between you, your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Okay? So just remember that if someone were to bring this up and said there's not a, God is a merciful God and there's no way he would have created these things, that we have to remember that these results, because there was a time, and the Bible goes on to say there will be a time again where the lamb lays down with the lion. And so we need to make sure that we understand that these things are a result of man's fall, the sin of Adam, that are still affecting the earth. Thanks.